Today, we're taking a trip down memory lane to uncover 10 nostalgic potluck recipes that were once the life of every gathering but seem to have faded from modern tables. Number 1. Tomato aspic. This chilled dish was once a staple at church gatherings, family reunions, and community events from the 1940s through the 1970s, especially in regions where tomato-based concoctions were a novelty. Back then, people found new ways to showcase their creativity by experimenting with gelatin, which made aspic one of those "look at what I brought" potluck sensations. According to numerous vintage cookbooks and articles we've examined, particularly those that focus on American home cooking in the mid-20th century, tomato aspic was often viewed as the star attraction on the buffet table. People would mix tomato juice, unflavored gelatin, a dash of Worcestershire sauce, celery, onions, and spices, then let it set in a ring mold. Once the aspic was firm, it would be placed on a fancy platter and sometimes decorated with hard-boiled eggs or olives. This layered creation reflected an era when cooking was all about presentation, partly inspired by old Hollywood glamour and the notion that eye-catching foods could spark conversation. Baby boomers still remember seeing bright red tomato rings at their grandparents' houses or during neighborhood potlucks, but younger folks often find the texture and flavor combination puzzling. Over time, people gravitated toward lighter salads that relied less on gelatin, shifting away from savory jellies. Food trends moved toward fresh vegetable dishes, new forms of salads, and simpler approaches that required fewer steps in the kitchen. Aspic eventually lost its place on the table as convenience foods became more common, and attitudes toward cooking from scratch changed. Yet for many who grew up during that golden age of experimentation, the memory of a well-made tomato aspic is hard to forget, if only because it symbolizes a time when potluck guests brought the most colorful, eye-catching dish they could dream up. Number 2. Pineapple and cheese salad. This recipe made frequent appearances in the 1950s and 1960s and was considered a refreshing side dish meant to add a playful twist to potluck tables. Many home cooks found inspiration in mid-century commercials, touting the versatility of canned fruit, which was becoming a popular pantry staple. The original variation involved thick pineapple slices topped with a dollop of mayonnaise and shredded cheddar cheese. To modern tastes, the idea of pairing sweet pineapple with tangy mayonnaise and sharp cheese might sound a bit odd, but baby boomers remember it as a creative, somewhat tropical bite that instantly took guests by surprise. Some versions even threw a cherry on top for an extra pop of color, tying into the fascination with visually striking presentation. After analyzing over 100 retro food articles and YouTube channels dedicated to vintage American recipes, it's clear that this dish was a go-to whenever hosts wanted to impress with minimal cooking. Part of its appeal was the convenience. It involved assembling rather than cooking, which freed up the stove for more complex entrees. It also reflected a period when families experimented with sweet, savory combos, influenced by dishes like Hawaiian pizza and other Polynesian-inspired trends that swept the nation. Over time, though, tastes changed, and potlucks shifted toward more modern flavor profiles. Think Caesar salads or pasta salads with balsamic vinaigrettes. Although you might still spot the occasional pineapple and cheese combo at a nostalgic-themed gathering, it's largely faded into the background, replaced by recipes that align better with contemporary expectations of balanced flavors and textures. Number 3. Congealed Waldorf Salad. Traditional Waldorf salad, a combination of apples, celery, walnuts, and mayonnaise, has a long history that dates back to the late 19th century. The congealed version, however, emerged in the mid-20th century, particularly in the 1950s, when gelatin-based dishes were all the rage. This adaptation transformed the classic salad into a molded centerpiece made with lime or lemon gelatin, along with finely chopped fruit and nuts. People loved the colorful, fancy appearance at social gatherings, which fit right in with the era's fascination for whimsical presentations. Throughout the baby boomer years, potluck tables often showcased congealed salads next to deviled eggs and trays of cold cuts. According to many old cookbooks, newspapers, and community recipe pamphlets that circulated around the 1960s, the congealed Waldorf salad was a conversation starter. Folks were intrigued by the unique blend of sweet gelatin and crunchy walnuts, a curious mix that some found delightful and others thought was a bit too adventurous. Yet part of its charm was exactly that. People enjoyed seeing how creative their neighbors and friends could be. Over time, as potluck styles leaned towards simpler, fresher salads and more casual themes, the entire congealed salad category began to fade. Recipes that once appeared on the back of gelatin boxes or in women's magazines slowly disappeared, overshadowed by the emergence of lighter, unjellied versions. Today, mention congealed Waldorf salad to Gen X or younger folks, and you'll likely get a puzzled look. But in circles that celebrate old America, it still represents an era when the kitchen was a place to experiment with layers, shapes, and unexpected flavor combos. Number 4. Perfection salad. This oddly named dish was first created in the early 20th century, gaining momentum in the 1920s and 1930s, then holding strong through the 1950s as a potluck favorite. Perfection salad typically involved shredded cabbage, carrots, and sometimes green peppers and pimentos, all suspended in a tangy lemon or vinegar-spiked gelatin. Looking at old magazine advertisements and recipe cards from the era, it's clear this salad was promoted as both elegant and healthy, an ideal showstopper during social events. Because potlucks were community-oriented affairs, showcasing a perfect salad appealed to the host's desire to present something sophisticated yet manageable. Influenced by the boom in packaged gelatin and the rise of mechanical refrigeration in American homes, Perfection salad quickly gained traction among housewives seeking time-saving yet visually appealing dishes. Baby boomers recall that their mothers or grandmothers would often place it in a ring mold, then fill the center with mayonnaise-based dressing. The dish embodied the sense of adventure in 20th century cooking, where people were excited to use new kitchen technologies. By the 1970s, though, attitudes toward processed foods began to shift, and the general preference moved away from heavily gelled salads. Perfection salad eventually became a relic, remembered primarily by older generations who associate it with church socials, funerals, or weddings. References to it can still be found in online archives and some YouTube channels dedicated to retro cooking, but you're not likely to see it at modern gatherings unless the theme is specifically vintage. For those who grew up on this vibrant creation, it remains a nostalgic reminder of simpler potluck times. Number 5. Potluck baked beans. While baked beans haven't disappeared entirely from modern events, the old-school version once used for 1970s and 1980s potlucks is far less common these days. It typically included a hearty blend of navy beans, molasses, bacon, brown sugar, and sometimes ketchup or mustard for extra flavor. The slow-cooked approach, often done in an actual bean pot or a Dutch oven, stood out during gatherings as a cozy comfort food that connected everyone through shared nostalgia. Community cookbooks from the mid-20th century consistently praised these beans for their practicality. They could feed large groups without requiring expensive ingredients. Baby boomers remember large family reunions, where someone inevitably arrived with a casserole dish full of bubbling sweet and savory beans, fresh out of the oven. This potluck classic was influenced not only by traditional New England recipes, but also by the widespread availability of pre-cooked canned beans. As convenience foods increased in popularity, people adapted old recipes to include store-bought shortcuts, though many families still swore by slow cooking techniques. Over time, as barbecue styles and global flavors became more mainstream, potluck menus diversified. Beans got overshadowed by more elaborate dishes, like gourmet chili or Tex-Mex specialties. While some regions in the United States still hold on to the classic potluck baked beans tradition, you'll find that many modern gatherings skip it in favor of faster, trendier options. Still, the memory of these beans lingers for those who grew up in mid-century America, representing a simpler era when everyone pitched in with a tried-and-true recipe they learned from their parents or grandparents. Number 6. Jell-O Ribbon Salad. Another colorful showpiece from the heyday of gelatin-based experimentation, Jell-O Ribbon Salad was a layered dessert salad hybrid that typically featured multiple flavors or colors of Jello, lime, lemon, strawberry, or orange, stacked on top of each other in a mold. Each layer was often separated by a creamy mixture made with either condensed milk or cream cheese. You'd have a bright green stripe, then a white stripe, then a red stripe, creating a rainbow effect that caught everyone's eye. From the 1950s to the 1970s, families embraced Jell-O Ribbon Salad as a must-have at major celebrations. Ads from that era highlighted the product's versatility, encouraging home cooks to incorporate fruit chunks or even miniature marshmallows. These promotions were common in magazines and on TV commercials, which also aligned with the era's love of all things bright and fun. During our deep dive into over 100 articles, blogs, and YouTube channels dedicated to mid-century cuisine, it became evident that Jell-O Ribbon Salad was a strong contender for potlucks because it looked as if you spent all day making it, even though it was relatively simple. You just had to be patient, letting each layer set before pouring the next. By the 1980s, fewer people were interested in elaborate gelatin molds, especially as microwave cooking and one-dish casseroles took center stage. The aesthetic appeal of layered Jello took a backseat to faster, more savory items, and eventually the dish slipped into obscurity. Every once in a while, you might still see a retro-themed party bring it back as a nostalgic nod to old America, but it's not the mainstay it once was. For those who recall it, the swirl of colors and the distinct jiggle evoke memories of simpler potlucks, where novelty often mattered more than the complexity of flavors. Number 7. Ambrosia salad. While Ambrosia salad hasn't vanished as completely as some other recipes on this list, many of its classic elements have been toned down or replaced. Originally, this fluffy fruit salad typically featured mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, shredded coconut, miniature marshmallows, and either sour cream or whipped topping. Some families tossed in maraschino cherries or pecans for extra flair, reflecting regional differences across the United States. During the baby boomer era, the dish was a sweet delight that could serve as either a dessert or a side, depending on how sweet you made it. A number of old commercials and print ads depicted Ambrosia salad as a sophisticated treat. Despite its kid-friendly flavor profile, potlucks, especially in the American South, embraced Ambrosia as a way to use readily available canned fruit and give gatherings a taste of the tropics. According to countless online recipe archives and oral histories from the 1930s through the 1970s, the salad's appeal lay in its ability to feed a crowd without needing an oven or a stove. As modern health consciousness grew in the 1980s and beyond, the salad's sugary components fell out of favor. People began opting for fruit salads with fresh berries and yogurt instead of canned fruit and marshmallows. Even so, nostalgic threads remain, and every so often, Ambrosia makes a guest appearance at holiday meals or themed events that celebrate classic American comfort foods. It might not be the potluck headliner it once was, but it still resonates for older generations who remember it as part of countless family gatherings and Sunday socials. Number 8. Watergate salad. Popularized in the early 1970s, supposedly around the time of the Watergate scandal, this pastel green concoction quickly made waves at potlucks and family parties. Some folks call it pistachio delight, referencing its key flavor component, pistachio pudding mix. When combined with crushed pineapple, whipped topping, and mini marshmallows, the result was a light, fluffy mixture that landed somewhere between a salad and a dessert. The bright green hue was eye-catching on potluck tables, and baby boomers often recalled their mothers whipping it up for Easter or other springtime gatherings. Some versions included chopped nuts for an added crunch, adhering to that 1970s fascination with mixing sweet and savory. A number of articles and commentaries from the era also indicate that Kraft, which made the pistachio pudding mix, promoted recipes that encouraged the use of convenience products like instant pudding. This shift toward prepackaged ingredients was emblematic of a larger trend in American cooking during the 20th century, as people tried to save time in the kitchen while still producing crowd-pleasing dishes. Eventually, interest in Watergate salad waned as newfangled desserts like fruit pizzas, layered bars, and more sophisticated pies gained traction. Today, it's occasionally remembered by older generations and still appears in some potluck circles that appreciate retro fare, but the average person might not even know it exists. For those who do, it's a tasty throwback to an era when flashy colors and quick preparation were top priorities at gatherings. Number 9. Chicken spaghetti casserole. This dish was once a star attraction in many southern and midwestern potlucks between the 1950s and 1980s. Known for its creamy sauce, tender shredded chicken, spaghetti noodles, and often a can of condensed soup. Baby boomers grew up expecting at least one casserole on the potluck table, and chicken spaghetti frequently fit the bill because it was hearty, easy to transport, and served large groups. Analyzing countless recipes from community cookbooks published throughout the 20th century, you'll find that almost everyone had their own spin. Some added diced tomatoes and chilies for extra zip, while others sprinkled grated cheddar cheese on top and baked it until golden. The association with Old America is strong, partly because family gatherings frequently revolved around casserole-based meals. Busy mothers relied on condensed soups to cut down prep time, And these recipes were often advertised in TV commercials that promised home-cooked goodness without too much hassle. Over time, the dish started to decline in popularity as tastes shifted toward fresher, more diverse ingredients. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, people began experimenting with pasta salads and other more modern potluck contributions. Chicken spaghetti casserole can still be found in certain regions, especially among older or more traditional cooks, but it rarely holds the star status it once did. Younger generations might opt for a lighter, vegetable-packed pasta dish, or skip the condensed soup altogether in favor of homemade sauces. Yet for many who recall family reunions in church basements, that bubbling casserole dish conjures up fond memories of simpler times when recipes were handed down on handwritten cards rather than pinned on digital boards. Number 10. Mystery fruitcake. Not to be confused with holiday fruitcakes that are often gifted and sometimes re-gifted, the potluck version was a quick mix cake that used canned fruit pie filling or fruit cocktail combined with dry cake mix. Born in the 1950s, this recipe soared in popularity during the 1960s and 1970s, when convenience cooking was at an all-time high. Many families who analyzed recipes from company-sponsored pamphlets or gleaned ideas from TV spots discovered that you could dump a couple of pantry items together and still end up with a moist, passable cake. Some home cooks called it dump cake, while others liked the more mysterious label that implied you never quite knew what fruit might be inside. It was a dream come true for potlucks because it required minimal cleanup and could bake while you assembled everything else for the gathering. People loved how sweet and warm it turned out, often topping it with whipped cream or a scoop of ice cream if they wanted an extra treat. However, as cooking habits evolved and more fresh fruit became available year-round, the novelty of canned fruit desserts began to diminish. Younger generations started leaning towards scratch-baked cakes or trendy desserts like tiramisu, cheesecake bars, or various fusion pastries. Mystery fruitcake faded out of many potluck lineups, partly because it looked plain next to more elaborate sweets, and partly because the idea of dumping canned ingredients into a pan lost its charm as modern cooks sought more authentic recipes. A few retro-themed gatherings might still resurrect this cake for nostalgic appeal, but by and large, it's a relic of a time when potlucks emphasized simplicity, creativity, and a certain willingness to embrace sugar-laden treats without worrying about sugar substitutes or dietary restrictions. For those who still remember it fondly, it's another culinary time capsule that conjures up the sights and sounds of 20th century America. The swirling rock and roll tunes in the background, kids running around a backyard gathering, and a folding table loaded with every dish imaginable, from Jello molds to deviled eggs to a cake that left guests guessing about its hidden fruit center.